Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. India and China held border talks again today, the 19th round in 3 years. Don't expect a breakthrough though. But this comes just before the G20 summit in Delhi, where Xi Jinping has been invited. Will the Chinese president come? And will he clear some of this mess before he does? Well, this has happened in the past. We'll tell you all about it. Meanwhile, China's iron brother Pakistan is celebrating its Independence Day today, but there's little to celebrate really. From bomb attacks to a crippled economy and political chaos, we look at how Pakistan is on the verge of becoming a failed state. In Russia, the ruble has crashed. We'll tell you why. Is ChatGPT going broke? They're spending some $700,000 a day and losing users. In India, student suicides are in focus again. We look at possible solutions to a crisis that needs our urgent attention and intervention. And in Niger, the ousted president could be prosecuted for high treason. All those stories and more coming up. The headlines first. China's defense chief heads to Russia and Belarus. Li Shangfu's 6-day visit comes as Beijing and Moscow look to strengthen ties. It's his second visit to Russia since he became the defense minister in March. He's yet to officially meet his US counterpart Lloyd Austin though. Saudi Arabia appoints its first ever envoy to Palestine. The move comes amid talks to normalize ties with Israel. The US is trying to broker a deal between Riyadh and Israel. The Saudi envoy to Jordan will also serve as the non-resident ambassador of Palestine. Iran's Shiraz shrine has been attacked yet again, the second time in less than a year. The attacker and 8 foreign suspects have been arrested. 1 person was killed. In October last year, there was a mass shooting at the same holy site. France launches a probe into the 2 bomb scares at the Eiffel Tower. The landmark tower was evacuated twice on Saturday. It's a tourist hotspot in Paris, visited by nearly 6 million people last year. And when it comes to football, all roads seem to lead to Riyadh. Neymar is set to become the latest footballer to join the Saudi League. The Brazilian superstar will join Al Hilal from PSG. The 2-year deal is reportedly worth $175 million. Our lead story tonight is about the India-China border standoff. For 3 years now, they've been locked in this standoff. Tens of thousands of troops deployed on both sides. What will it take to resolve this? You may say talks, and they're happening, but they follow a predictable pattern. Officials from India and China meet. India pushes for troop withdrawal. China refuses and stalls. Then it suspends diplomatic contact. For months, nothing happens. China uses this time to ramp up its activities and to find new ways to provoke India. And this plays out on repeat mode. It happened again today. Indian and Chinese officials met. This was a military-level dialogue, the 19th such conversation in the last 36 months. The current standoff began in May 2020. The first round of talks happened a month later in June 2020. And what have they achieved after 19 such meetings? Some disengagement, but no de-escalation yet. Will today's meeting yield a different result? The meeting is over, but it's too early to say. There is something that is different though. There was a sense of urgency. And it's been like that for weeks now. We've seen hectic diplomatic activity. First, the foreign ministers met. Then India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval met China's top diplomat Wang Yi. And today we saw military-level talks, the 19th round. The focus was on the border situation. The last such meeting happened in April this year. So this is after almost 4 months. The timing is very important. This comes just ahead of the G20 summit. India is the host, as I'm sure you know. The event is scheduled for the 9th and 10th of September. China is a member of the G20, so Xi Jinping is invited, but he is not RSVP'd yet, at least not formally or publicly. So we don't know if he's coming. Is he waiting for progress on the border? Or is India leveraging its position to push for a withdrawal? We ask because there is precedent. In 2017, we faced a similar situation. Indian and Chinese troops were locked in a standoff in Doklam. China was hosting the BRICS summit in that year, 2017. India is a member of BRICS. Prime Minister Modi was supposed to travel to China, but his attendance was not confirmed till the last minute. A border truce was brokered just 2 days before BRICS. When the standoff ended, New Delhi announced the Prime Minister's visit. Now this time, India holds the G20 presidency. It can use this position to raise China's border provocations. In fact, India has already highlighted the issue. It happened some 5 months ago. There was a meeting of G20 foreign ministers. Again, India was hosting it, and China's then Foreign Minister Qin Gang was attending. India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar met him on the sidelines of the G20 foreign ministers meeting, and he later tweeted about it. Jaishankar said he discussed the situation on the border. The engagement got a lot of media attention, including the frosty handshake between Jaishankar and Qin Gang. Now we're heading into the G20 Leaders Summit. Xi Jinping would certainly like to avoid an awkward encounter with Prime Minister Modi. And they will come face to face at least twice in the coming weeks. First at the BRICS summit in South Africa, that's happening next week. And then at the G20 summit in India next month. The optics won't be great for Beijing. Xi Jinping visiting New Delhi while his army provokes India at the border. He would not want to confront a hostile crowd. So some kind of a détente will help him. Also, Chinese diplomats need a win. The sacking of Qin Gang has left them humiliated. He was the foreign minister of China. First he went missing, then he was fired. Beijing did not bother to explain what happened to him, and Qin Gang has not resurfaced yet. Now this is worsening China's trust deficit. The world does not trust China. A border deal with India would help them. But for that, Beijing will have to meet New Delhi halfway. And how is India approaching this? What are India's priorities? India wants to achieve progress on 3 fronts. First, confidence-building measures. Second, sharing of patrol information to avoid further clashes at the border. And third, more communication between the 2 armies. The standoff continues at 2 flashpoints, Depsang and Demchok. So far, there have been 4 rounds of disengagement. Indian and Chinese troops have withdrawn from the Galwan Valley, Pangong So, Gogra and Hot Springs. And yet tensions remain quite high. Troops remain deployed on both sides of the border since the Galwan clash in 2020. India has had more than 60,000 soldiers in Ladakh. The PLA attacked Indian soldiers in Galwan. 20 Indian soldiers were killed in action. Many more were killed on the Chinese side, but they refused to give a number. Since the clash, China has added more troops and infrastructure along the border, and it keeps provoking India in other areas. For instance, last year, there was a scuffle in Arunachal Pradesh. This was in the Tawang sector, in India's northeast. It did not escalate. Both sides disengaged quickly, but this is a powder keg. One wrong move can trigger a conflict. China's policy is deceit and denial. It insists that there is no problem at the border and that India should focus on other aspects of their relationship. But India has refused to accept that position. Last month, National Security Advisor Ajit Doval said the border situation has eroded strategic trust. So India's position is unambiguous. Ties with China cannot be normal until the border is settled. The question is China serious about normalizing ties? Its actions do not inspire confidence. For 10 months now, they have not appointed an ambassador to India. The last envoy was this man, Sun Wei-dong. He left the post in October 2022. Since then, China has not named a replacement. There seems to be no urgency to fill this post in New Delhi. Perhaps that's one place to start. The next few weeks will be critical in understanding Beijing's intent.
Back in Karachi comes the swearing in of Mr. Jinnah as Governor General of Pakistan. The green and silver flag is hoisted and Muhammad Ali Jinnah does homage to the birth of Pakistan. Pakistan acclaims the transfer of British power as Mr. Jinnah, Governor General of the new Dominion, arrives at the Constituent Assembly in Karachi.
It's the 14th of August, which means it is Independence Day in Pakistan, their 77th. It's a day of celebration for them, also a day of introspection. Almost 8 decades since it was born, Pakistan is on the verge of becoming a failed state. It is plagued by many challenges: financial, political, diplomatic, security. The country is one bad day away from a military coup. So tonight, let's look at where things stand. We'll start with security. On Sunday, a Chinese convoy was attacked in Balochistan. The Chinese engineers were unhurt here, but 2 of the militants were shot dead. The attack was claimed by the BLA, that's the Baloch Liberation Army. Now, there is history here. China is investing around $60 billion in Pakistan. Their plan is called CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC. Many of the projects are based in Balochistan. Just one problem, though: the locals don't like it. Most of the jobs and resources have been hogged by China. So local militants have taken up arms. In 2021, they attacked a bus carrying Chinese workers. More than a dozen people died. China has been asking Pakistan to solve this problem, but no luck. The attacks keep happening. This time too, China is doing the same. More condemnation, more demands for a solution, but the BLA is not Pakistan's only problem. Both the Pakistani Taliban and the Islamic State have been on the offensive in Pakistan. Last month, in fact, the Islamic State bombed an election rally in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. More than 50 people died, 5-0. The Pakistani Taliban also launched an attack last month. Again, the same province. At least 2 policemen were killed. But their biggest attack was in the month of January. A suicide bomb blast near a mosque in Peshawar. More than 100 people died. This is a classic policy boomerang. Pakistan used terrorism to hurt India, but today their own cities are under attack. Mosques, rallies, nowhere is safe. To address this, you need an accountable and well-meaning government and politicians, which is the second problem. Pakistan's politicians exist for one reason: to serve the army. Consider the government of Shehbaz Sharif. Before the parliament dissolved, he pushed through multiple bills. All of them had one goal: to strengthen the Pakistani army. I'll tell you about 2 of them: amendments to the Official Secrets Act and the Pakistan Army Act. What do? Well, if you criticize the army in Pakistan, or if you leak information about the army in Pakistan, you could get up to 5 years in jail. Plus, the intelligence agencies have been given extra powers as if they needed more of it. This was Shehbaz Sharif's parting gift to the army, his way of ensuring his re-election. That is, of course, if the election happens. The parliament has already been dissolved. A new caretaker prime minister has taken charge. This man, Anwarul Haq Kakar. He's a little-known lawmaker from Balochistan. His job is to oversee the election. Technically, this should be done in the next 90 days, but there are concerns. The outgoing government wanted to do a census first, to redraw Pakistan's electoral map. If that happens, it could take more than 4 months. Enough time to fix the results. Also enough time for Nawaz Sharif to return to Pakistan and for Imran Khan to be shut away. Truly, democracy in action. Whoever the army picks has a tough job to do, because Pakistan's economy is in the dumps. That's challenge number 3. Their weekly inflation is up 31%. Their projected GDP growth is 0.5% and unemployment is more than 6.5%. Foreign reserves have rebounded though. Pakistan can thank the International Monetary Fund for that, IMF. In June, their forex was down to $4 billion. Now it's around $9 billion. This is the magic of a bailout. Pakistan has taken 23 loans from the IMF. Around 12 of them have been bailouts. It's become a regular cycle. Pakistan's leaders run the country to near bankruptcy. The IMF bails them out and repeat. Why does this keep happening? Because Pakistan's economy's fundamentals are weak. Actually, they're non-existent. Last year, their trade deficit was $48 billion. Virtually everything is imported. Only one major player is still betting on Pakistan, and that is their iron brother China. Beijing owns around 30% of Pakistan's total debt. So China commands and Pakistan obeys. Which brings us to the final issue, diplomatic isolation. Pakistan is the only Muslim country with nuclear weapons. It also has the second largest Muslim population in the world after Indonesia. Anyone else would leverage this, but not Pakistan. Islamabad has become an outlier in the Islamic world. Their traditional partners are avoiding them, like Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Their Cold War allies are fed up with them, like the US and Europe. As for neighbors, Pakistan has antagonized all of them, even the Taliban, whom they created. Today, countries engage with Pakistan for one reason only, and that is terrorism. The world fears that Pakistani nuclear weapons will fall into the wrong hands and terrorists based in Pakistan will mount an attack. It's the sad and unfortunate reality of Pakistan. As the country celebrates its 77th Independence Day, it is on the brink of becoming a failed state. An immediate course correction is required, but knowing Pakistan, it also looks impossible. Now let's talk about Russia. It is facing a new problem. The ruble is falling. The Russian currency has sunk to new lows. Today it breached the 100 mark. What does that mean? It means you can exchange $1 for 100 rubles. This is a 17-month low, and this has been a trend of late. 2023 is not going well for the Russian currency. Since January, it has lost 40% of its value. The 100 mark is a psychological one. The ruble breached it today. Do you know when was the last time this happened? In March last year. That's when the ruble dropped to 136 against the dollar. This happened right after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But by June last year, the ruble had recovered. It was trading at 50. The recovery was thanks to high prices of oil and gas. The fall in March was a knee-jerk reaction, a consequence of Russia's decision to attack Ukraine. So what is happening now? Why is the ruble falling again? Because exports from Russia are falling. I have some numbers from the month of April. The value of Russian exports fell by 35% in that month, in April. And why are exports falling? Because Russia's oil and gas revenues have declined. In July last year, Russia earned over $16 billion from the sale of oil and gas. This was last year, July. 1 year later, this earning has fallen to less than $7 billion. Now, oil and gas is Russia's main export. So when its value falls, less money goes into Moscow's coffers. And that in turn puts pressure on the currency. But things may improve soon because remember, Russia's economy is not slowing because of sanctions. Instead, it is adapting. It is also growing. As per the latest data, the GDP expanded by 4.9%. This is for the second quarter of 2023. And why is this significant? Because so far, the Russian economy had been shrinking. In the last 4 quarters, there was a contraction, mostly because of Western sanctions. There has been immense pressure. Moscow has shown remarkable resilience. If the present trend continues, Russia's GDP would be back to pre-war levels. The conflict has frozen, but the economy has not. Industrial production is up in Russia. That's due to high levels of defense spending. It is helping Russia's economy. And this is not unheard of, by the way. In the past 2 wars have led to economic growth. Let me give you some examples, in fact. During World War II, America's GDP grew by more than 17%. This was in 1942, 17% growth. The Korean War also boosted the American economy. This was in 1951. The US grew by 11.4%. Then we had the Vietnam War. Again, the US economy grew rapidly. In 1966, its GDP peaked at 7.3%. What explains this paradoxical relationship between conflict and economic growth? There is a simple explanation. During war, there is unprecedented mobilization of natural resources. Factories ramp up production. There is investment in infrastructure. All this expansion creates jobs, and that fuels economic growth. But who foots the bill for this? It's usually the government. Leaders need resources to fight wars, so more budget is allocated towards defense, and that's exactly what's happening in Russia right now. Moscow has set a new defense spending target. It's a target of $100 billion. Earlier, the target for 2023 was $54 billion. So the new goal is almost double, perhaps because Russia has already spent the amount budgeted earlier. In the first 2 months of this year, Russia's defense bill was worth $26 billion. That's half of the original budget, $26 billion. And where is all this money going? Mostly to make weapons. The Russian army will get more military resources. Moscow has been boasting about this progress.
The Russian weapon-making industry not only quickly adapted to working under fierce sanctions pressure, but also its power grew many times over in some areas.
There is a message for Ukraine here. More weapons means Russia has no intention of slowing down. This war will continue. Moscow is looking for a clear outcome, not a stalemate that leads to a negotiation. That does not mean the sanctions are not hurting Russia. They are. They have curbed growth and options. But they failed to inflict the kind of pain that the West had hoped for. Now let's talk about ChatGPT. Last year, it took the world by storm. It could write essays, clear exams, compose emails, even crack jokes. The AI language model was the talk of the town. But 7 months after its launch, it's making news for another reason. Is ChatGPT going broke? A new report throws up interesting data. It says that OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, is on the brink of bankruptcy. That's because the costs are too high. It takes them about $700,000 a day. $700,000 a day to run ChatGPT. That's over 5 crore rupees every day. The company is burning cash and its user base is declining. So will ChatGPT crash? Our next report tells you.
To write an essay.
Do you use ChatGPT? Well, if you have, you may have noticed it has an answer for everything. Except one question: who can afford it? The explosion of generative AI has taken the world by storm. But we rarely talk about its cost. A new report has analyzed the cost. It says OpenAI, the maker of ChatGPT, may be on the brink of bankruptcy. It apparently costs $700,000 to run ChatGPT every day. And that's just their AI service. There have been efforts to monetize its other versions like GPT 3.5 and GPT 4. But even then, the company hasn't been earning much. It doesn't even make enough revenue to break even at this point. Last year, OpenAI bled around $540 million. That was as it developed ChatGPT. Now it says it needs $100 billion to meet its ambitions. That's a lot of money. OpenAI projects an annual revenue of $200 million in 2023. In 2024, it expects to reach $1 billion. But the fact is OpenAI isn't profitable yet, and the only thing keeping it afloat could be Microsoft's $10 billion investment. This comes at a time when its users are declining. Last November, ChatGPT was the fastest growing app in history. It added a record-breaking influx of users. But since then, the company has seen a gradual decline. Compared to June, July saw a 12% drop in users. They dropped from 1.7 billion to 1.5 billion. ChatGPT may have taken the world by storm. But something like ChatGPT takes huge amounts of processing power. And training those models can cost tens of millions of dollars. For companies, it's an eye-watering investment, both on state-of-the-art chips and recruiting prize-winning researchers. There are unpredictable costs of cloud computing. Companies often let their engineers run up bills. That's because they're in a mad rush to build technology. But these companies are often in for a big surprise. That's the mounting bills. And it's often the dark cloud that looms over the AI revolution. But while companies like OpenAI may be running at a loss, ignoring profit in the initial stages can only mean one thing. The cost of AI will eventually be passed on to the customer. So next time you ask ChatGPT something, beware, it could be a $1 million question.
People often romanticize pressure. If an athlete does well, we say they handled the pressure well. If not, we say they choked. Some people get more poetic about it. They say diamonds are formed under pressure. Well, all of it is true. But what about those who crumble under pressure? Those who simply can't survive it? Let me tell you what happened in Tamil Nadu. A 19-year-old boy took his life on Saturday. He couldn't clear the NEET. NEET is an All India exam, the National Eligibility Cum Entrance Test, NEET. If you want to pursue medicine, that's where you start. Now, this boy couldn't crack it on his second attempt. So he died by suicide on Saturday. The next morning, his father did the same. He simply couldn't handle the grief. That's an entire family destroyed, and over what? An entrance exam. And this death was not an isolated case. In June this year, 2 NEET aspirants died by suicide in Rajasthan. The reason? Stress. In fact, student suicides are on the rise. In 2021, India saw thousands of them, 13,000 suicides. That's around 35 deaths every single day. Not all of them were linked to stress, but academic pressure was a major reason. Even elite colleges are not immune to this phenomenon. The IITs, or the Indian Institute of Technology, has reported 31 suicide deaths since 2018. And remember, these are the IITs. Some 11 lakh students appear for the entrance test. Only a few thousand make it. If they are cracking under pressure, something is wrong. So how are they addressing it? Well, the IITs have introduced some changes. For example, their mid-semester exams have been dropped. Mentorship programs have been added. The idea is to make students open up, to not let them suffer in silence. I know all of this sounds like a horror movie, and nothing good happens at these elite colleges, but that's not the case either. That's not true. India's elite colleges are a success story. They have produced great scientists, business leaders, reformers. In fact, other countries want to replicate it. The government is planning to set up IITs in 7 countries. The first will be in Tanzania. These are not just colleges, these are gateways to success. I'll give you an example. India has around 108 unicorn startups. At least 68 of them had a founder from IIT. That's more than 62%. They've headed some of the biggest multinationals in the world, like Sundar Pichai at Google, Arvind Krishna at IBM, Raj Subramaniam at FedEx. The same can be said of most elite Indian colleges like the IIMs, Indian Institutes of Management, and the IISc, or the Indian Institute of Science. The current ISRO chairman is an IISc alumnus. So was his predecessor. So the quality is evident. These colleges have put India on the map. Higher education is not just a Western monopoly anymore. Indian colleges can match the West and in some cases even outperform them. So we're clearly doing something right. Does that mean it's perfect? Well, absolutely not. There are more than 500 medical colleges in India. Put together, they offer around 87,000 seats. But guess how many students write the medical entrance? Around 1.4 million. So just 6% of the students get a seat. Those are horrible odds. Parents know this, students know this, teachers know this, yet the numbers keep rising. More and more students keep appearing for these exams. The question is, what can we do? Building more colleges is the obvious option. More seats, better odds. But that can only help you so much. If you keep building colleges, you will dilute excellence. Another option is to strengthen grassroots education, to find out what children are good at. Tell the parents about it. Advise them on how to move forward. You see, ambition alone cannot give you success. You also need aptitude. Students should be taught that in school. Career guidance cannot be some time filler on Fridays. It should be engaging and compulsory. What we need basically is to strike a balance. Yes, our higher education system is competitive, maybe too competitive. But dismantling it cannot be the answer. We need to tackle this issue from multiple angles. The government can build more colleges, teachers can offer advice, parents can identify aptitude. You need all of this to rectify the problem. Because 35 student suicides in a day is criminal. It means that the system needs an upgrade, and an urgent one too. Speaking of upgrades, Europe needs to upgrade its migration policy. The current one is disastrous. Migrant boats are sinking almost every week. Hundreds of children are dying at sea. And what does Europe do? Condole and move on. Last week, there was a major accident. Migrants had boarded a ship from Tunisia to Italy. Somewhere along the journey, the boat capsized. At least 41 people died. 3 of them were children. Another accident happened in the English Channel. 6 migrants died after their boat sank. But the worst was in late June. A migrant boat sank off the coast of Greece. 750 people were on board. Only 100 of them survived. What about the rest? Presumed dead. Their bodies are yet to be recovered from the Mediterranean Sea. The problem is not a new one. Migrant boats have always capsized in this region. But this year, the numbers are up. More than 1,800 migrant deaths have been reported so far. This is higher than the last 5 years. In 2018, there were 1,300 deaths. By 2020, it fell to 1,000. But now in 2023, migrants are moving again. Where do they come from? A lot of places. Pakistan, Syria, Libya, Tunisia, Afghanistan, Morocco. They set off from North Africa, mostly from Tunisia and Libya. But their boats are not fit for the journey. We are talking about rubber rafts and fishing vessels, and that too overcrowded ones. They have little chance of completing the journey, hence all the accidents. But a couple of questions still remain. Number one, what explains the uptick in migrants? And number two, what is Europe doing to stop this? Let's answer the first question first. Most of these migrants are fleeing poverty, not persecution. Food prices are at a record high. Jobs are disappearing fast. So staying back is not an option. Just look at South Africa. It is considered among the biggest African economies. But South Africa's unemployment rate is 33%. 1 in 3 people don't have jobs. To solve these problems, you need a stable and reliant government, but again, no luck. Africa's coup belt is active again. The latest was in Niger. So people have lost faith in their countries and their governments, and they have made a drastic choice, either Europe or death. Which brings us to question number 2. What is Europe doing about all of this? And let's be clear about one thing. These migrants are not refugees. Europe is not legally obligated to take them. It's the government's choice to welcome migrants or not. But how they do it, how they make that choice is important. In 2015, the European Union was proactive. They tripled their migrant rescue budget. More money, more ships, more surveillance. The idea was to save the people first and then decide what to do with them. Now it's the opposite. Europe's rescue teams are grossly underfunded. They don't have enough assets either. So when accidents happen, there are delays. Some countries like Italy have gone a step ahead. They're cracking down on rescue ships. Elsewhere, they have money to spare. The coast guards of Libya and Tunisia are funded by Europe. In June, European leaders traveled to Tunisia. They struck a deal there. Tunisia gets $1 billion in aid. In return, they stop migrants from leaving their shores. A quick side note, Libya and Tunisia are notorious for abusing migrants. There are reports of torture, sexual violence and extortion, and Europe knows all of this. Yet they fund both Libya and Tunisia. The problem here is lack of empathy. European leaders have turned migration into a political weapon. Case in point, Poland. Their government has announced a referendum. It will be held on the 15th of October. The question for voters is this: do you support the admission of thousands of illegal immigrants from the Middle East and Africa? Basically, it's a vote on Europe's migrant policy. Polish voters can accept or reject it. And what exactly is the policy? The EU agreed that all members should share responsibility for migrants. Even if they land in Italy, every member would host them. If not host, at least pay for them. Poland and Hungary don't want to do either. Fun fact, this is the same Poland that hosted 1 million Ukrainian refugees. I guess that was not a burden. And no one is asking Europe to resettle all these people, but give them a fair chance. You can't fund abusive regimes to do your dirty work. You can't look the other way when migrants drown in your backyard. Unfortunately, that's what Europe is doing. And now let's turn our focus to West Africa. Troops are set to gather around Niger. This is a standby force of the West African bloc called ECOWAS. They want to build pressure on Niger's junta, force them to reinstate the democratically elected president, Mohamed Bazoum. But the junta has other plans. The coup leaders want to prosecute Bazoum for high treason. It's a sign that the junta does not plan to back down. Also, a warning to ECOWAS, any aggression could impact Bazoum's health and safety. The president has been held hostage by the military since they took over on the 26th of July. Reports say he's being kept in the basement of the presidential palace. His wife and son have also been imprisoned. The threat to prosecute him means that the military is willing to kill, because a trial for high treason has few other outcomes. So will this threat make the West African democracies back down or further goad them into action? Here's a report.
It seems the West African Economic Bloc, ECOWAS, has a new problem. Niger's new military junta have thrown down the gauntlet. They made this announcement today.
In any event, the government of Niger has to date gathered the necessary evidence to prosecute before the competent national and international authorities the ousted president and his local and foreign accomplices for high treason and undermining the internal and external security of Niger following his exchanges with the nationals of foreign heads of state and heads of international organizations.
The junta will prosecute ousted President Mohamed Bazoum for high treason. He'll also be tried for undermining the internal and external security of Niger. This is for alleged exchanges with foreigners and international organizations. The charges seem easy enough to prove. The junta can cite the presence of American, French and other troops in Niger to say Bazoum was hurting the country's security. It's a kangaroo court case that'll end in Bazoum being found guilty. So why is the junta going ahead with this? As we said, Niger's military is issuing a challenge, threatening ECOWAS with consequences if they invade. Last week, the bloc held a second emergency meeting since the coup. ECOWAS said it would intervene militarily if Bazoum wasn't reinstated by August 7th. The deadline passed and Bazoum was still in detention. And that's where ECOWAS began to look weak. It didn't follow through with its threat. So far, it has imposed sanctions on Niger, set up a standby force, but it hasn't actually retaliated. Domestic public opinion may have prevented ECOWAS from attacking.
It should be by dialogue. Let's come to the round table and talk. Because of the human resources there, we don't want anything to happen. Nigeria and Niger, we are brothers, and we share the same border. And there's interrelationship between Nigeria and Nigeria. And even apart from that, we are Africa, we are in the same continent. We should not be like others continents that did not see their brother as their brother. Nigerians are our brother, and we should be our brother's keeper.
So, Niger's junta seem to have smelled weakness and thrown up this Bazoum trial as a protective shield. They could use the trial as a way to negotiate with ECOWAS, use his life as a bargaining chip, a way to prevent any military interventions and get sanctions lifted. The sanctions have already started to hurt Niger.
The Nigerian transitional authorities regret this attitude of a certain international community, which consists in showing its solidarity with the few politicians of the deposed regime, and at the same time lacking in empathy towards the Nigerian populations hard hit by the illegal, inhuman, and immediate sanctions of ECOWAS, which go so far as to deprive the country of pharmaceutical products, basic foodstuffs, and the supply of electricity.
About 70% of Niger's electricity was supplied by neighboring Nigeria. That has been stopped due to sanctions. It has led to a dire situation. Parts of the country barely get electricity for an hour or two each day.
We used to work from 8 a.m. to midnight, but now it's impossible. We have an average of 1 hour and 30 minutes of electricity a day, and it's very difficult to be productive in such conditions. Since Nigeria cut off the electricity, our sales have gone down. We try to work with a generator, but we can't use it for long hours because it's expensive since we have to buy fuel regularly.
If Niger's junta believe they have a bargaining chip, they can demand a reversal of sanctions. But there's still a chance that Bazoum's prosecution could backfire. It could end up spurring ECOWAS into action. So it seems Niger's junta have been making friends to shore up its defense. There was already support from fellow coup-hit nations Mali and Burkina Faso. The ruling juntas there promised to step in if Niger was attacked. Now it seems Guinea has joined them.
As far as the Republic of Guinea is concerned, we are Pan-African. When our people have problems, we're always there and we'll always be there. And that's what happened with our brothers in Mali, Burkina and Niger. As far as we're concerned, we are the only ones who can find solution to our problems. Our position is clear, and that is to face up to our people's problems, which are very, very important to us.
Niger's junta sent a delegation to Guinea. Guinea's military leaders stopped just short of promising to intervene, but they are backing the coup leaders. So Niger seems to have found another ally. It's uncertain whether this will stop any ECOWAS military intervention, but what is certain is that West Africa seems to be more divided than ever.
The truce has failed and the battle has been reignited. This statement could apply to a number of things, but tonight we're talking about electric vehicles and price wars in China. At the center of this is Tesla. Elon Musk has slashed prices again and set the cat among the pigeons. Starting today, the Tesla Model Y will cost about $2,000 less in China. This is for two variants of the Model Y, the long range and the performance versions. The long range will cost you $41,300 and the performance model will cost about $48,200. These prices are for China and they're significantly lesser than prices in Europe or America. So Tesla's profit margins will take a hit. Tesla stocks are already falling. They closed down by 2% today. So why is Elon Musk doing this? To capture China's automobile market, specifically its electric vehicle industry. Now here's something you should know. China has the world's largest EV market. It is also the world's biggest maker of electric vehicles and it has been at the top spot for years now. This has fueled the growth of many local EV giants as well. Companies like BYD Auto. It's a big player now. Just a few days ago, its new energy vehicle production hit the 5 million mark. 5 million vehicles that run on non-traditional energy. BYD Auto was founded in the year 2003. And look at the trajectory. It took 13 years to hit 1 million vehicles, then 18 months to hit 3 million vehicles, and only 9 months to reach the 5 million mark. That is rapid expansion.
BYD now has more than 90,000 employees in research and development, as well as 11 research institutes. On average, we submit 19 patent applications and obtain 15 patent authorizations each working day. That has been continuously driving our technological innovation.
This growth comes at the expense of established global players like Tesla. And BYD Auto is just one of China's major EV makers. There are other companies like SAIC Motor, Geely, NIO and Leap Motor. They're all competing in the same space, the electric vehicle space. And they're giving global players like Tesla and Volkswagen a run for their money, both in China and abroad.
BYD sold more than 50,000 electric vehicles overseas last year. From January to July this year, we sold more than 90,000 new energy vehicles overseas. And we expect a surge in this regard in the second half of the year as we deliver more products. Besides BYD, many other Chinese brands achieved very good results overseas in the past few years.
Notice how the BYD manager praised other Chinese companies as well. There's a reason for this. Chinese EV firms have helped the country. They've beaten Japan in car exports. This was in the first half of this year. And they're doing it as part of a plan. BYD recently called for a global push, an effort to quote-unquote demolish the old. As you can imagine, Tesla wants to avoid that. It wants to stay relevant. And for that, it must maintain a firm presence in the world's largest EV market, hence the price war. It started last December. Tesla slashed prices by thousands of dollars. Chinese automakers were forced to retaliate. Soon it became a war of attrition. But in recent weeks, tensions seem to have cooled. They were talking about a deal, a pledge to avoid quote-unquote abnormal pricing in China. Tesla, BYD and many other players were on board. They wanted this deal. But the deal was scrapped almost as soon as it was negotiated. Why? Because regulators in China saw it as market manipulation, as cartel behavior. So the automakers were forced to play ball and the price wars resumed. Tesla has fired its latest salvo. Perhaps it did not have a choice really. Tesla sales declined by 31% between June and July. This is for their made-in-China cars. But this is not limited to the Chinese market. This drop of 31% is for worldwide sales from Tesla's Chinese factory. So it's quite significant, and it came after price cuts from competitors like Geely, Leap Motor and NIO. They reduced prices by thousands of dollars. Now Tesla has done the same to keep its market share in China and beyond. But this has also shaken the confidence of Chinese automakers. All their stocks tanked today. BYD, Leap Motor, Tesla, everyone saw a drop. Because lowering prices will also lower profitability. It's a vicious cycle. It will bleed all these companies. The only ones who benefit are the Chinese customers. EV buyers can expect a slew of discounts in the days to come. This is a developing story. We'll keep track for you. Our next story is about one of the biggest taboos of parenting, the favorite child. This favoritism has been a muse for memes, the path to Oscars for Sophie's Choice, and the bane of every black sheep's existence. But parents rarely admit that they have a hidden favorite. Sometimes they treat it like a dirty secret, other times they don't even know if they have one. But let me tell you this, parental favoritism exists. The numbers will surprise you. Studies say 65% of the families worldwide have a favorite child who is given special treatment over their siblings. And this is usually brought up in good humor, but in real life it can be very harmful. It comes with sour family ties and long-lasting mental health impacts. What are the pitfalls of picking a favorite? And can parents simply avoid it? Our next report tells you.
Parents worldwide are in on a little secret. They're colluding together, keeping their children in the dark and lying to them day after day, sometimes even unknowingly. But now it's time to burst the bubble. You haven't been imagining things. Studies say most parents do in fact have a favorite. If you're the black sheep, yes, this is the stuff of nightmares. And if you're the golden child, don't get too happy yet. This is kind of a lose-lose situation. But before we cue the crisis, let's cover the basics. What is parental favoritism? It's where a child is treated differently as compared to their siblings. The favorite child gets privileged treatment. Now, most parents would disagree they do this. They rarely admit to picking a favorite. Only 10% parents do, to be exact. But science disagrees. Research says parental favoritism occurs in about 65% of families, and this happens the world over across different cultures. It's so widespread that psychologists have a name for it. They call it parental differential treatment. And it's more than just a quirk of family life. It can actually cause widespread damage to children's well-being. The golden question is, who is the golden child and who is less favored? Many believe that birth order plays a role. The firstborns are the natural favorites. That's not really true though. Research says last-born children are more likely to be picked. So, what causes this so-called favoritism? The strongest predictor is a parent's feeling of the child being similar to them. But even so, this isn't a sure-shot formula. Favoritism is subjective. Sometimes being the favorite is about receiving more praise, attention, and affection from parents. Other times, it's about enjoying less discipline or attention. Research says children are aware of preferential treatment from an early age, and feeling second best comes with harmful consequences like low self-esteem, depression, anxiety, and risky behavior. It can also cause indirect problems. A Chinese study says it can increase mobile phone addiction among teens. A Canadian study says it can hamper family ties. Less favored children can share a difficult relationship with not just their parents, but also their siblings, which is worrying. Because, according to science, good sibling relationships are important for lifelong happiness. And favoritism doesn't just end with childhood. The problems continue to haunt people well into their adulthood. Maternal favoritism is associated with higher depression scores in adults, but the issues aren't limited to mental health. When people are young, favoritism can mean lesser time spent with parents. As adults, this changes. For them, favoritism could mean unequal financial support for a child compared to their sibling. As we mentioned, the problems of favoritism don't favor the favorites either. Complicated sentence. Basically, being the golden child can cause emotional distress too. Favored children are prone to depression. They also bear the brunt of conflicts with less favored siblings. And during adulthood, favorite children often deal with unequal burden, as they usually take up the caretaker role for their parents. All in all, favoritism is damaging to families. The question is, why can't parents just stop picking favorites? Usually because they don't know they're picking one in the first place. They do so unintentionally. And experts say the answer is not to treat all of one's children the same. That would be impossible. The solution is to become more self-aware and to not cause unequal or partial situations. Favoritism passes down from generation to generation. Becoming aware of differences in treatment can help break the chain. After all, playing favourites is a dangerous game for children.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. We're starting with Italy. The most active volcano in Europe has erupted. Mount Etna illuminated the night sky with a series of small eruptions. In India, the state of Himachal Pradesh witnessed deadly flash floods and landslides. At least 29 people have been killed. In Kerala, tens of thousands of people made their way to the town of Alappuzha. They witnessed the 69th edition of the annual boat race. It was held ahead of the harvest festival of Onam. And finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1941, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill and US President Franklin Roosevelt issued the Atlantic Charter. It said that the two nations had common aims and desired no territorial changes amid the Second World War. We leave you with that. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
I will not fail thee nor forsake thee. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed. For the Lord thy God is with thee, whithersoever thou goest.
And our future. They were joined by the Prime Minister, who, as you would expect, took a lively interest in the course of events.